Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to how British and American camping is very different. Now, this should be an interesting one because I can't imagine how camping is that different. Maybe the only thing is that we don't really roast marshmallows here. Like, I think it's quite a common thing in America for you to start a fire and roast marshmallows. But outside of that, I can't think of any differences. We both use tents, we both use sleeping bags, you know, like fairly similar stuff. So I'm quite interested to see, you know, what things are discussed in this video. It's by Lost in the Pond, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. So I know it's going to be good. So let's do it.
Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to camping. This past Labor Day weekend, I decided to get away from it all and do what many Americans are doing at this time of year, pitching a tent at a campsite. While this was largely intended as a mini vacation and not the setup for a video, I did nonetheless have a lot of thoughts about the many ways in which camping differs between Britain and the United States. Here are 5 of them. I don't have any
Yeah, okay, fair. Yeah, we don't really sing songs, man. Yeah.
evidence for this, but I get the sense that singing around a campfire is a more widely accepted activity in the United States. Firstly, Americans are generally less inhibited when it comes to communal singing, though Brits begin to catch up once alcohol is introduced.
100%. As soon as people are tipsy, oh man, it all comes out.
Secondly, American horror films tell me that I'm definitely correct about this. Now, this is not to suggest that every American camping trip immediately devolves into a touring musical. Indeed, during this Labor Day weekend, I didn't even see a single guitar, but the notion of campfire songs certainly exists. Whenever I have heard it in action, the songs of choice range from John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads to Everything by Johnny Cash. Having never been a Boy Scout, I struggle to think what the British equivalents might be. Several sources seem to indicate a leaning toward traditional songs like She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain or Old MacDonald, but I do expect a hearty rendition of Come On Eileen once the Heineken kicks in.
Definitely.
I've just realised that's not applicable to Boy Scouts officially. Merely
Glamping.
from my own experiences.
Glamping has started to take off here. That's like glamorous camping. So really nice luxury tents with, like, you know, different things inside.
Of camping in both countries, I long ago fell under the misconception that glamping, a portmanteau of the words glamorous and camping, was chiefly an American thing. After all, it seemed that every American I spoke to couldn't quite believe that me and my British friends would sleep in our tents without the added comfort of an inflatable mattress. Roughing it was all part of the, you know, glamour. It didn't help, of course, that I assumed that the word glamping was of American origin. I mean, the country does have quite a history of coining travel-themed portmanteaus like staycation and motel. But the first known instance of the word can be traced back not to the United States, but to the United Kingdom in 2005. Indeed, the practice of glamping goes back way further. In the 16th century, the Scottish Earl of Atholl hosted King James V up in the Highlands. The story goes that the king's visit took place inside a tent which was filled with amenities from the Earl's palace. And then there's the wild account of Henry VIII's meeting with Francis I of France. In 1520, they each attended the Field of the Cloth of Gold.
Looking at this picture just makes me think of Game of Thrones. Like, imagine what it must have been like to have been alive during these times. Life expectancy was probably like 35 or something.
Summit, in which almost 3,000 tents were erected in northern France with access to fountains that produced only wine. I can only imagine that these were installed to appease protests over the lack of public Wi-Fi. And today, glamping is practiced in both countries by people seeking a brief vacation in the great outdoors without breaking their backs in the process. And while America might not be able to claim the word glamping as its own, it makes up for it with these. When you move to the United States, much like any other
S'mores, is that that's a like a marshmallow between two crackers, right? 2 biscuits. Is that it?
country, you spend the first year or 5 asking the question, what is that? This was precisely my response upon hearing the word s'mores for the first time. For those not in the know, a s'more is a popular campfire concoction in which a roasted marshmallow is planted on top of a piece of chocolate and thrust between two graham crackers. Indeed, when it first entered American culture about 100 years ago, it was referred to then as a graham cracker sandwich. Shortly after, a recipe for the sandwich was posted in the 1927 iteration of Tramping and Trailing with the Girl Scouts under the name Some More. The contraction s'mores was common in American cookbooks by the 1950s. Now, while I certainly never encountered them in Britain, it wasn't unusual to roast and eat marshmallows by themselves. That said, since I left the motherland 13 years ago, there have been efforts among British bloggers and vloggers to recreate s'mores. With graham crackers and Hershey bars harder to come by across the pond, these are often substituted with digestives and Cadbury bars. While this might appease the odd, sometimes very odd American, it's a little more difficult to
I love how she's just looking around like, what am I doing here?
replicate this. As I tried falling asleep on the inhibitively comfortable mattress, the difference in nighttime ambience between the United States and my homeland was stark. Here in the Midwest, it's highly likely you'll be serenaded, as I was, by the sound of not just crickets, but cicadas.
Man. Dang, those things are loud.
On the surface, this combination does sound quite soothing, but as someone whose brain comes alive after midnight, I made the mistake of recalling then and there that what I was hearing were mating songs. And let me tell you, nothing signals insomnia like the thought of cicadas going at it, especially when you consider that when it's all over, the males just die.
Oh my
it's awful. God. Even as the female delivers their offspring, the males are notably absent, a trait often shared with humans.
But who's going to pay the child support? Oh man, I couldn't help it.
Humans. After this though, the female cicadas also die. It's just sad. Anyway, the ambience in Britain is quite different. In the absence of cicadas and crickets, it's the elements whose voices call loudest as the nighttime winds let the tent know who's boss. This in turn prompts nearby trees to creak, and since Britain is often given to light precipitation, I spent many a camping trip falling asleep to the pitter-patter of rain. Of course, much of the US is no stranger to this. It's just that in the Midwest, and most certainly in the Deep South, rain tends to be heavier and less conducive to a good night's sleep. The same might also be said of these.
Do you guys like? I find it really relaxing when it's raining outside, but I'm like in bed, like the sound of the rain hitting the window. That I really like that.
It doesn't matter how many times I tell myself that this isn't the actual wild, there will always be a small part of my brain that wonders how you successfully fight off a bear. At least that has become the case since I started camping in America, and while Illinois isn't noted for its bear population, the same cannot be said of other places I've camped, like West Virginia. The mountain state is reportedly home to 8,000 black bears. Thankfully though, black bear attacks on humans are extremely rare. But facts have no meaning when it's dark outside and everybody else is asleep. Another animal that British campers don't have to worry about is raccoons. I've actually lost count of the amount of times Americans have warned me to keep an eye on my...
Are raccoons and skunks part of like the same, you know, animal group? Because they look really similar.
Cooler while camping, and that's because raccoons have quite the history of breaking into them and stealing your bratwursts. In extreme cases, they might even take the entire cooler, so it's a good idea to secure it with a bungee cord and affix the cooler to a tree and put the tree inside a safety deposit box and blast the whole thing off into space. We didn't encounter any this time. In Britain, the animal I most remember being concerned about while camping was the fox. And when I say concerned, I mean I thought about it for a second and then fell to sleep. You see, Britain just doesn't have so-called dangerous animals on the level of the United States.
Nowhere
In fact,
near.
It probably says a lot that foxes are also found throughout the United States and yet barely come up in this particular conversation. And why would they when America has bears, snakes, black widows, alligators, and pumas, all of whom, it should be said, are statistically very unlikely to trouble you while camping. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below.
Really interesting indeed. Another great video by Lawrence. I mean, the big one I think is the animals, and with the cicadas or the cicadas coming in a distant second. just, you know, falling asleep and, you know, just waking up at like 1 a.m. to find this bear pawing at my tent, I would crap my pants. I would instantly just be like, it would give me the fright of my life. It's not something that we have to worry about here. Like you mentioned, foxes, that is the number one thing you're gonna find. I mean, and it's still rare that they'll actually approach you. They come out at night where people are asleep. So yeah, animals, the wild animals of America is the big one for sure. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.